Hello, everyone. She never smiled on the runway. She wore her aristocratic indifference like a crown. And while the fashion world was obsessed with sultry sensuality and sun-kissed beauty, Stella Tennant marched in like a shadow, sharp, silent, and impossible to ignore. Born into British nobility but dressed like an androgynous rebel, she was everything the 90s were not ready for, and everything it ended up worshipping. At the peak of her career, while others clung to the spotlight, she quietly stepped away. No scandal, no farewell, just silence. So, who was Stella Tennant? Really, why did this icy beauty haunt the world of high fashion long after she vanished from its stage? Stella Tennant was born in 1970 into a world that, on the surface, appeared polished and privileged. Her childhood home was a grand estate nestled in the Scottish borders, a place of wind-blown moors, stone walls, and generational history. But despite her aristocratic lineage, she was the granddaughter of the legendary Deborah Mitford, Duchess of Devonshire. Stella's world was far removed from the glamour of the catwalk. Her upbringing was quiet, rural, and grounded. Her parents, Tobias Tennant, a landscape gardener, and Lady Emma Cavendish, raised their children in an environment that valued privacy and simplicity over publicity and spectacle. Stella climbed trees, mucked through fields in boots, and built forts out of stones. Her childhood was filled with the textures of nature, not fashion. There were no television crews, no Parisian ateliers, no red carpets, only books, family dinners, and a sense of modesty so deeply embedded, it never truly left her. What set her apart even then was her quiet intensity. She was reserved, not shy, thoughtful, not withdrawn. There was something watchful about her. Even as a child, teachers described her as observant, deeply creative, and unapologetically individualistic. She was not the girl who tried to fit in, and she certainly was not interested in performing femininity to meet anyone's expectations. In a culture that often pushed young girls toward polish and performance, Stella leaned into silence and strength. Though she came from wealth, she was never materialistic. Her family valued the intellectual more than the ornamental, and that sensibility shaped her artistic soul. She went on to study sculpture at Winchester School of Art, not modeling, and had no ambitions to enter the fashion world. If anything, she was skeptical of it. She viewed it as a distant universe built on artificial ideals she never related to. But that quiet power, the angular features, the piercing blue eyes, the unapologetic way she carried herself, it was already there, buried under layers of tweed, Wellington boots, and stone walls, was the presence of someone unforgettable. A presence the fashion world would soon discover and never quite know how to contain. Her entry into fashion was not a glamorous discovery story. There was no shopping mall moment, no sidewalk scouting. In fact, Stella Tennant had no interest in modeling at all. She was 23, living in London, wearing thrift store menswear and working odd jobs after finishing her degree in sculpture. Her look was striking. Yes, short black hair, aquiline nose, razor-sharp cheekbones, but it was far from what the industry celebrated at the time. And that, perhaps, was exactly what made her unforgettable. In 1993, she submitted photographs of herself pierced septum and all to British Vogue for a feature on unconventional beauty. It was meant to be a one-time thing. But when legendary fashion editor Isabella Blow saw the images, something clicked. She saw not just a face, but a statement, a rebellion dressed in wool and steel. The next call came from Stephen Meisel, the photographer behind the most iconic images of the era. He flew her to New York and shot her for Italian Vogue. The images were stark, powerful, and unlike anything else in fashion at the time. Within weeks, Stella went from anonymity to a name whispered at every fashion house in Europe. Designers were drawn to her like gravity: Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, Gianni Versace, Helmut Lang. She brought something raw and cerebral to the runway. She was not selling sex or sunshine. She was selling defiance. Her walk was straight, androgynous, untouchable. She did not smile. She did not play. She simply appeared, and the room changed. Stella's presence challenged the existing beauty standard. At a time when fashion was still dominated by the glamazon energy of Cindy, Naomi, and Claudia, Stella arrived like a monochrome painting in a room full of neon. She wore minimalism like armor. She refused to tweeze her eyebrows. She kept the nose ring. She wore masculine silhouettes with elegance and menace. But despite the rapid ascent, Stella remained reluctant. She was never seduced by fame or money. In interviews, she often spoke of modeling as just a job, and one she never intended to do forever. The industry offered her the spotlight, but she kept one foot outside it, always ready to walk away. And yet, even without chasing it, she became a symbol, a new kind of beauty, one born not from smiles or curves, but from strength, intellect, and the refusal to conform. By the mid-1990s, Stella Tennant was no longer just a rising face, she was a force. Her breakthrough came not with noise, but with presence. Karl Lagerfeld, never one to be swayed easily, chose Stella as the face of Chanel. It was a seismic moment. She was not the typical Chanel woman, not glamorous, not soft, not classically beautiful in the traditional sense. But that was exactly what made her revolutionary. In 1996, Stella walked the Chanel runway, wearing a tweed suit with bare legs and a nose ring, her stare colder than the marble floors beneath her. Lagerfeld called her his muse, elegant, aristocratic, and fiercely modern. She redefined what Chanel could be, no longer reserved for delicate femininity. It was now inhabited by sharp lines and sharper cheekbones. The fashion world followed. Versace, Dior, Valentino, everyone wanted her. But Stella never transformed to fit the brand. The brand transformed to fit her. She appeared on the covers of British, Italian, and French Vogue. Campaigns with Calvin Klein and Burberry cemented her image as both raw and refined. In every photograph, there was tension, a push and pull between heritage and rebellion, nobility and punk. Even in silence, her face spoke volumes. But it was not just the fashion that made Stella magnetic. It was the contradiction she carried so naturally. She was the granddaughter of a duchess, yet the poster girl for androgynous minimalism. She moved through the elite spaces of fashion with an unshakable discomfort, never trying to charm, never trying to sell, simply existing as herself. There was one show in Paris, Stella walking in a sleeveless black tuxedo, slicked back hair, no makeup. No one clapped as she walked. They were too stunned. She did not look like she was modeling the clothes. She looked like she was daring the audience to see her, all of her, and not look away. Unlike many supermodels of her era, Stella never became a celebrity off the runway. She kept her interviews brief, her public appearances rare. There was no scandal, no self-promotion, only the work. And in an industry often built on spectacle, her refusal to perform only made her more mythic. Stella Tennant, at her peak, was not just part of fashion. She became a mirror, reflecting everything the industry wanted to be, and everything it feared. Stella Tennant did not break the rules of fashion, she simply never acknowledged them. While her peers adapted to the industry's shifting beauty codes, Stella stood still, unbothered, unmoved. And somehow, the world bent around her. She refused to pluck her eyebrows. That was not a fashion statement, it was who she was. Her features remained sharp, masculine, unconventional. There was no softening, no attempt to appeal to the mainstream. When asked if she ever considered cosmetic procedures to conform to the era's expectations, she answered plainly, "Why would I change what makes me, me?" Stella's rebellion was not loud. It was stoic. It came in the form of saying no to what others chased blindly. She turned down jobs she felt compromised her values. She avoided roles that sexualized her image or commodified femininity in ways that felt dishonest. She wore her punk roots quietly in the cuts of her suits, in her silence, in her refusal to play the game. Even her early campaigns pushed boundaries. In one photo shoot for Italian Vogue, she wore men's trousers and stared straight into the lens. No seduction, no performance, just presence. The image became iconic, not for its glamour, but for its refusal to conform to what a female model should be. Fashion tried, at times, to tame her stylist's added curls. Designers pushed her into gowns, but it never worked. There was something in her gaze that made it clear she was not there to please. She was there to exist on her own terms. And when she spoke, which was rare, she revealed a mind far deeper than the industry was used to hearing from. She questioned the pace of fashion, the waste, the obsession with youth, years before sustainability became a buzzword. Stella Tennant was quietly championing it. She reused clothes, worked with ethical designers, and promoted conscious consumerism in interviews not to be trendy, but because it aligned with who she was. Her political silence was also a statement. While others crafted personal brands out of their opinions, Stella chose discretion. Her resistance was in her refusal to be labeled feminist, aristocrat, rebel, muse. She was all of them, and none of them. In an industry obsessed with packaging and selling identity, Stella Tennant's greatest act of rebellion was this: she refused to be reduced. Then one day, she was simply gone. Stella's death left a void not only in fashion, but in the quiet corners of the world she had chosen to inhabit. Her flowers, her children, her sustainable design projects. They all told a story of someone trying to live honestly, even if not loudly. And maybe the loudest tragedies are not those that scream. Maybe they are the ones that pass in silence, like Stella herself. There was no announcement, no dramatic farewell tour, no tell-all interview. Stella Tennant began to withdraw from the fashion world in the early 2000s, quietly stepping back to focus on what she had always held closest: her family, her privacy, and her garden in the Scottish countryside. She married French photographer David Lasnet, raised 4 children, and turned her attention to environmental causes. Her runway appearances became rare. Her name faded from headlines. But behind that silence, something heavier was stirring. In December 2020, just 5 days after her 50th birthday, news broke that Stella Tennant had died suddenly at her home. The fashion world was stunned. Tributes flooded in: designers, editors, fellow models, all speaking of her elegance, her strength, her unwavering individuality. But no one seemed to know why. It was later confirmed, in a brief family statement, that Stella had been struggling with mental health issues. And though they did not elaborate, their message was clear: she had been fighting silently, and she had lost. The tragedy landed like a shockwave, not only because she was young, but because she had always appeared so composed, so distant from the chaos of fame. Stella was the one who seemed above it all, the one who had escaped. But even the strongest silhouettes cast long shadows. There were no public breakdowns, no scandals, just a slow, quiet retreat from the world, until one day, she did not return. Some tried to make sense of it, to read between the lines of past interviews, to look back at photographs for signs. But Stella Tennant was never one to reveal more than she chose. Her silence was her shield. And in the end, her silence remained. It is tempting to ask how someone so poised, so seemingly complete, could disappear in this way. But perhaps that is the wrong question. Perhaps we should ask instead, why are we always surprised when grace conceals pain? She never courted fame, yet became unforgettable. She never followed trends, yet defined an era. And in the end, Stella Tennant left behind more than images. She left behind a question. What does it mean to truly be yourself in a world built on illusion? Her legacy cannot be measured in runway shows or magazine covers. Though she had plenty, it lives in the quiet shift she forced within the fashion world, the permission she gave to be angular, androgynous, intellectual, restrained. She opened the door for a different kind of beauty, one that did not apologize, one that did not seduce, one that stood its ground. She also became a quiet pioneer in sustainability. Long before it was fashionable, she promoted ethical brands, re-wore her clothes, and questioned fashion's environmental cost. She did it not for press, but for principle. Younger models, designers, even editors, they speak of her now not as a celebrity, but as a compass, a symbol of artistic integrity, of stillness in a culture of noise, of refusal in a system built on compliance. There is a photo of her unsmiling, hair slicked back, eyes sharp, not posing, not performing, just being. That image has outlived trends, magazines, even her own life. And maybe that is her greatest legacy. Stella Tennant taught us that rebellion does not have to roar. Sometimes, it just has to stand there, unbent, unspoken, unbroken. So tell me, if she were to walk onto a runway today, would the world finally be ready for her? Or was she always meant to belong to a time that never existed?